Ever wonder if your mind holds a secret power, a power so incredible? The CIA spent millions trying to weaponize it. What if I told you that for over 2 decades, the US government ran a top-secret program to train psychic spies? This isn't science fiction. This is the declassified, real-life story of Project Stargate. Imagine this, it's the height of the Cold War. Tensions are high. The US intelligence community gets wind that the Soviets are pouring money into something called psychotronic research. They're investigating telepathy, clairvoyance, and the ability to influence things with the mind. The CIA, not wanting to be left behind in a psi gap, decides to launch its own investigation. And so, in 1978, at Fort Meade, Maryland, Project Stargate was officially born, though its roots go back even further to the early 70s. The core of the program was a technique called remote viewing. Now, what exactly is that? Simply put, it's the practice of seeking impressions about a distant or unseen target, supposedly using extrasensory perception, or ESP. A viewer would sit in a room, sometimes with a monitor to guide them, and be given a set of coordinates, a sealed envelope with a picture, or just a vague question. Their task was to describe what they saw in their mind's eye. They'd sketch drawings, jot down sensory details, sights, sounds, smells, textures. The goal was to gather intelligence on targets they couldn't access through conventional means. Think about the implications. Spies who could see inside a secret Soviet weapons facility without ever leaving their chair. Agents who could locate a kidnapped official or find a downed aircraft just by focusing their mind. It sounds like a comic book, but for the people involved, it was serious business. The program recruited a fascinating mix of individuals, from artists and academics to military personnel. One of the most famous was a man named Ingo Swann, a New York artist who was instrumental in developing the actual protocols for remote viewing. He wanted to turn it from a spontaneous psychic event into a repeatable, trainable skill. Another key figure was Joseph McMoneagle, a retired Army officer often referred to as Remote Viewer 001. His track record, according to program files, was astonishing. He claimed to have helped locate a secret Soviet submarine, describe the construction of new buildings at a nuclear facility, and even find a lost US operative. He and others like him were the psychic soldiers on the front lines of this unconventional Cold War battleground. Now, let's get into some of the specific, declassified missions. The documents are a wild ride. One famous session involved a remote viewing of a Soviet nuclear research facility at Semipalatinsk. The viewers were given nothing but geographic coordinates. They began describing a massive crane, strange spherical objects, and underground structures. Later, satellite imagery confirmed their descriptions with eerie accuracy. They had described a facility where the Soviets were building components for a particle beam weapon. But the missions weren't just limited to Earth. This is where it gets really strange. One of the most famous documents to come out of the Stargate files is a session from May 22, 1984. The target Mars, in a specific time period, 1 million years BC. The viewer, who we now know as Joseph McMoneagle, was given a sealed envelope with just coordinates and the time frame inside. He began describing the surface of Mars not as the barren red planet we know today, but as a place with a thin atmosphere and violent geological activity. Then, he focused on a specific location. He described seeing what looked like pyramids, massive, smooth, and clearly artificial. He felt a sense of deep sadness, of a people who were dying out. He described tall, thin figures, wearing strange, silky clothing. They were an ancient civilization, facing an environmental catastrophe they couldn't stop. They were looking for a way to survive, seeking a new home. He described seeing them get into a massive spacecraft and leave, heading into the vastness of space. When the session was over, the monitor opened the envelope. Inside was a card that read, "The planet Mars. Time of interest approximately 1 million years BC." It's a stunning account. Is it proof of an ancient Martian civilization? Or is it simply the product of a skilled viewer's imagination, perhaps influenced by the science fiction of the time? The document itself offers no conclusion. It's just a raw transcript of the session, a single, baffling piece of a much larger puzzle. Skeptics, of course, have a lot to say, and they should. Critical thinking is essential here. Many scientists argue that the successes of remote viewing can be explained by a combination of factors. First, there's cueing. A monitor might unintentionally give clues to the viewer through their body language or the way they ask questions. Second, the descriptions provided by viewers were often vague and general. A viewer might say, "I see a building near water." Well, lots of important targets are buildings near water. It's the human tendency for pattern recognition, known as apophenia, that makes us connect these vague statements to the actual target after the fact. We see the hits and ignore the misses. And there were plenty of misses. For every successful viewing of a Soviet facility, there were sessions that produced absolutely nothing of value. The viewers themselves admitted the data was often noisy and hard to interpret. It was like trying to listen to a single conversation in a crowded, noisy stadium. You might pick up a few clear words, but the rest is just a jumble. So, after more than 20 years and about $20 million, what was the final verdict? In 1995, the CIA commissioned a report by the American Institutes for Research to evaluate the program. The report's conclusion was a mixed bag. It stated that while some results were statistically significant and hard to explain, the phenomenon was not reliable enough to be used for operational intelligence gathering. In simple terms, something interesting seemed to be happening, but you couldn't count on it to find a ticking bomb. And with that, the plug was pulled. Project Stargate was officially terminated, and its files were declassified. But the story doesn't end there. The declassification of these documents opened a Pandora's box. The community of remote viewers didn't just disappear. Many of them, like Joseph McMoneagle and another famous viewer, Major Ed Dames, went public. They started teaching remote viewing to civilians, writing books, and appearing on television. They believe that this is not a superhuman power, but an innate human ability that anyone can learn to develop with practice. They argue that the military was just scratching the surface of what's possible. Today, there are countless workshops and online courses that claim to teach the same protocols developed. For the CIA, people are using it for everything from trying to predict the stock market to finding lost keys, or even for personal spiritual exploration. The legacy of Stargate is a fascinating split. On one hand, you have the official government stance. It was an interesting experiment that ultimately failed to produce actionable intelligence. On the other hand, you have a thriving subculture of believers and practitioners who are convinced that the government stumbled upon one of the most profound discoveries in human history, and then simply walked away from it. So what should we make of all this? Are we all latent psychics, with minds capable of transcending space and time? Was the CIA onto something revolutionary? Or was Project Stargate just a bizarre, multi-million-dollar dead end born from Cold War paranoia? The declassified files don't give us a final answer. They just present the data, the sketches, the transcripts, the successes, and the failures. They leave it up to us to decide. The truth is, the line between the explainable and the unexplainable is often blurry. Perhaps the most intriguing part of the Stargate saga isn't whether remote viewing is real or fake, but that our own government took the possibilities so seriously. They dedicated decades of research and millions of dollars to exploring the furthest reaches of human consciousness. And in the end, the story of Stargate leaves us with more questions than answers, challenging our understanding of the mind and its place in the universe. It forces us to ask, what are the true limits of human potential? Thanks so much for diving into this incredible story with me. If you enjoyed this journey into the world of declassified secrets, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe for more deep dives into the unexplained. Let me know in the comments what you think about Project Stargate. Was it a real psychic spy program, or just a Cold War fantasy? I can't wait to read your thoughts. See you in the next video.